Hello everyone, I am Vridhi, your host for this session. Welcome to the X Factor Festival, a special event hosted by Zafar. Before moving into the session, let me tell you all a bit about Zafar. So, Zafar is a career guidance platform designed to help you succeed in the early stages of your career. It helps you explore career paths, get counseling and mentoring, and collaborate with like minded people. Today, with our guest speaker Richard, we will dive into the world of creativity and get a peek into a designer's mind to learn the essentials of design thinking and creativity. So, Richard is a very talented designer and illustrator who is also a visiting faculty at NIFT. He has an experience in leather design, illustrations, surface development, textile, embroidery, and whatnot. So, hello and welcome to X Factor Festival, Richard. How are you?
Hi. Thank you, Vidhi, for calling me over. It's good and exciting. Uh, yeah, floor's all yours.
So I think before we dive into the session, you can tell a little bit about yourself to the audience.
Okay, so well, she's given Vidhi's already given a bit in a nutshell for me, but I'll give you in a crux. So I did my graduation from NIFT. It's like a 4-year intensive course. I studied fashion and leather and illustration is my USP. And from there, I moved on to work with a designer called Samant Chauhan. From I was also doing my graduation project with him, and I worked with him for like 4 seasons. Eventually, moving on to a design studio. It's called A1 Home Collections. I think they've changed their name right now. So they're based out in Miami in USA, but they have their sampling and production unit in Delhi. And so like I worked there for like 2 years and eventually moving on to the export house and the export scenario. And from there onwards, I went into digital marketing. And in 2019, joined NIFT as a faculty. And I've been like teaching the evening program, illustration, elements of design, and all. Apart from all this academic and all this, I am also a freelance illustrator and designer. I do illustration. I also do paintings, and I quite recently last year I did an exhibit with this designer in collaboration with this designer called Aneet Arora. She runs this label called Pero. So we did an exhibition with the India Art Fair. So yeah, that's what the thing is
So
all about, right?
now that you have mentioned Pero, I cannot ignore it. So how was your experience working with Pero? And I have heard that you work with Adidas too. So if you would like to
Yes.
share your
Uh,
experience.
yes. So with Pero, Pero is known for her details. She's one revolution in the Indian fashion
Right.
industry, and she came into this picture of, celebrating something called labor of love, how everything is handmade and hand detailed. And my association goes back before I knew her. So there was this show she did, I think she in Lakme, I think where she did some 10 pieces. And those were days where like I was in school and
Hmm.
I mean, she's predominantly a women's wear designer, and I said, okay, well, we have something fresh in Indian fashion industry, but apparently she was doing women's wear, which is something for men like us we can't buy. So if you can't buy women's wear, why don't you make it yours by sketching it? So, that I started sketching, looking at her garments. And one day, she reposted one of my sketches, and,
Wow.
it went on. And so I ended up doing a couple of projects with her. And she quite recently did limited edition Adidas sneakers. Stan Smith and Superstar she did, and she had her own take on it, which I had to illustrate, and landed up sketching it out, which again she landed up posting in her page. So I think she's one of those designers who really appreciates handwork and something that is done in this whole world of digital art and with the AI taking over. She is one of those few designers who has taken center stage and who's appreciated something that is handmade, because handmade things are not perfect always. There is some
Right.
dissimilarities. It is not. There's no binary to it, and LHS is never equal to RHS. So, but she appreciates that, and so yeah, so we worked on together with that.
Loved it, loved it. So it must be kind of surreal when she reposted you, like the kind of recognition and appreciation you get after that. So I'm really happy for you for that.
Yeah. So initially, when she reposted my first post, so it was from one of the first collections that she did. It was all in checks, black and white, and it had this red flowers. And and those days I had this Windows phone. So Windows phone would not support Instagram. So they had something called Pictastic. That was an app. I mean,
Okay.
like the Windows version. So I never got to know that my work was reposted.
Oh,
It's one of my colleagues who told me, "Ki, oh, your work has been reposted there." And I was like, whoa, did that just happen? And then there was like, oh, wow. Because those were days, like you were in your learning days, initial years of coming freshly out of college or doing a graduation project. That time it didn't matter, I mean, the people, how you want to reach out to you. Those were days, okay, mere followers बढ़ जाएंगे Instagram me or whatever. So I was like, wow, something happened. But then, as I changed my phone model from Windows to Android to an iOS, and I realized, okay, there's a business platform. And, and then I have been doing freelance projects, small projects, big projects through Instagram and, with recognition. But, I will always give credits to Brand Pero, giving me that first limelight.
so today in our session we have a lot of young minds. So and I think we all are curious to know like how did you landed up being a designer? Like what was your journey since childhood? Like what inspired you?
Oh gosh, it's a it's a tough one though. I think I was never meant for science or commerce or be a doctor or an engineer. I think my right side of the brain worked more than the left side, and I mean, failing twice in school, one after the other consecutively, I knew, okay, maths is and something that is just not meant for me. And those were days when, like in CBSE, just to clear it, 33 marks were needed. And, that 33 was something which was like a big thing. But, as I went ahead, there was a lot of reading. There was a lot of reading, there was a lot of research. I mean, those were days where we didn't have phones. So our only source was the school library or the newspaper or, all these fashion magazines and all those things. And if somebody would go to Daryaganj book market, we would ask them, कि अच्छा magazine ले आना हमारे लिए, so that we get that exposure to it. And like as we read through, we realized, okay, there is something called NIFT, there's something called NIT. These are the two premium institutes those days. And then once we get into the NIFT factor, we see, oh my God, they have so many courses. They have fashion designing, they have knitwears, they have leather, they have accessories, they have textiles, and NID, vice versa. So like you have to really groom yourself, like uh fashion might be your passion, but it is also a career option as well, because fashion is like really vast, it's not just about the cool new shirt. It is also about how you make that shirt, how you illustrate, how you interact with the buyers, how is that particular shirt sustainable, with the sustainable element coming into the picture. How is that sustainable? So it's like a wide option. And then like I started doing a lot of research, and eventually, like those were days that we weren't earning. We were relying on our parents' money, and we took some money from my sister and got the prospectus, and eventually landed up filling that form. I could not clear NID, but I was able to clear NIFT, and rest is all history. Getting into NIFT Delhi and that to leather design, and 4 years of extreme hard work, and here I am.
So I think our audience can take that academic excellence is not everything, but you need to do the hard work. You cannot just like jump into a good college.
Yes, like what I see normally these days is like, people completely relying on these coaching institutes. Okay, I don't want to name them, but they're completely reliant. Ki, okay, we'll go to this coaching institute and we'll do it. That's not it. You really have to groom yourselves. You have to be aware what's going in, what's going out, what's happening in the fashion industry, who's getting a certain particular award, or say, I mean, the brand logos, what do they signify? I think you really have to do a lot of reading. You have to be aware, and you have to read a lot of fashion journals. For example, I'll give you a hypothetical example. In case you're applying for NIFT, that does not mean that you have to be in sync with journals related to fashion, you know because design is unanimous, it is everywhere. So you have to be reading about architects, you have to be reading about interior designers, you have to be reading about designers who are designing automobiles. So there is like a holistic approach.
So I guess moving on to our next question now. So now I think that design and creativity is a very subjective concept, right? So, but sometimes when you work with brands or commercials or like your personal vision and their demands may collide. So, how do you balance out those situations?
uh, yeah, so I think creativity is within everyone. There is not a single person who's not creative. I mean, your handwriting to how you take food, how you park your car, there is creativity involved. Coming to the commercial aspect, yes, it is very, very important, when you take up a project. Uh, and of course, when you take up a project, there are certain guidelines given by XYZ or whatever whom you're doing the project with. It is very, very important to clarify what they want and what are your USPs. Because as a designer, you will have certain style, you will have a certain USP. So you have to be in equilibrium with yourself as well as the person or the organization whom you're taking the uh, project with, because you don't want to be someone who's dominating, because you might not give your 100% if there is someone who's asking you to please add this, please add that, and then you lose your own dilution, like you get
Yeah.
diluted, and you tend to lose out your authenticity, your aesthetics are gone. So it is very important to very in the initial stage itself to clear out and be clear the fact that okay, these are going to be my inputs, what do you want, and this is how I work. I have a certain color palette, I have a certain style.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, that is very important.
So I you don't have to completely lose yourself when working commercially. You can still be yourself and like value the brand.
Yes, yes, of course it is very important. Of course, very first thing is make sure, I tell this to every creative person, even my students. If you are taking a project, please, please, please do not work for free. Because creativity is an intellectual process. You put in your resources, you put in your money, you put in your intellectual
Right.
mindset, right? And
Right.
and there is this mindset of okay, just we'll give you a letter of acknowledgement or like
Hmm.
appreciation, which is not enough. And in today's day and age, money is important. Like you have to survive. It is all
Of
about the
course.
money. So it is very important to, clear out things in advance. And I always suggest people to work in two ways. There is a commercial way and there's a non-commercial way. So in non-commercial way, what you do is you put in your design thing and you tell them, okay, this is the design, this is the color. You use it as it is with your signature. All right.
Okay.
And there's a commercial way in which you give the design, but you charge them in a certain manner and you tell them, okay, you are free to use the design in any way as possible. You can change the color, but the fundamental base of the design remains the same and you have to give the credibility. Of course, actually, credibility goes in both commercial and non-commercial ways. It's very important.
So now that you have mentioned about like price and the efforts that goes into it, so many young artists, I think they struggle with how to price their work, like how to put the value to that skills that they have. What advice do you have for our young artists there when it comes to pricing?
Okay, so when it comes to pricing, uh, I mean, like when you take up a project, first thing is you have to clear if it's commissioned or not commissioned. Okay,
Okay.
if it's commissioned, ask them the budget. What is the budget? And then the designer can tell, okay, I have a certain style for which I charge this. I have a certain style B for which I charge this. And then I have certain style C for which I charge this. And then you explain them the commercial and the non-commercial aspects. Never forget, even if you're doing a small project, if it's even if it's like non-payable, or like if you do projects with like NIFT, or like some government organizations which were no, or a project which you are doing for a friend, I mean, you might not charge them, but credibility is important. You can, your signature should be there, and the person should give the credits. Okay, illustration given done by XYZ person. This is the Instagram handle. Because you have to respect your work, because you will never excel if you do not respect your work.
Right. So, do you think that as an artist and like creator, that creators and artists in general, they are not credited enough for their work, or they are not respected enough? Like, is there any stigma still lying in the society?
Oh yeah, there is this stigma. Okay, so in case you're putting your work on Instagram, there will be many people like you, and of
Hmm.
course in your DMs there'll be people randomly asking you stupid questions, and there'll be also people who'll be asking you your price, and they'll be like, shut, because they cannot
Hmm.
afford. So please do not compromise over there. If your particular artwork costs about $1,000, keep it $1,000, because it is you who knows the amount of hard work that has gone into it, the amount of hours that you've spent, the amount of resources that you've done, right? So please do not compromise there. And there is, yes, especially in the Indian markets, I would say people do not want to pay. They just don't want to
Right.
pay.
Right.
They just don't want to pay. And secondly, please understand, in case, even if it's a digital artist or someone who's doing a hands-on illustration or drawing or painting, you have to understand that if the software that you guys are using are expensive. For example, the stationery that you're using, they are expensive. Be it a marker or be it a pen. There are certain pens that cost you around like $1,000. There are these Copic markers that we use. They're really expensive. A set of 36 costs about 25,000, and they're irreplaceable. So, I mean, do not compromise on that. Keep all these things in mind.
So, like, I think you are right. Like, Indian audience is like very reluctant to pay. So, have you ever had a situation where someone comes and like starts bargaining for your project, like, thoda kam kar do, please?
Yes, yes, there are. It's everyday scenario. I mean, but
So,
designers like Pero and all, they don't compromise on price. If I quote them a certain amount, they agree to it. So the work has to be equally that
yeah,
great, right?
of
But
course.
there are people who would think that this is some random sabzi wala sitting here ki bhai tal wo kar lo, and like you you what compromise and negotiate on a certain price. That's not how things work. And that is the reason that many of the designers and illustrators don't get the limelight, because
Hmm.
their price. And but it is important, because there is something called self-respect. There is something called the work has to be reflected. So I think,
Right.
yeah, that's, and I have come across many scenarios that people have asked me, like they'll give me $20 to make a sketch, or like 50 rupees. I mean, which is like,
Yeah,
I mean, like
that,
you just want to laugh it off.
but
So
like that can be kind of offensive because you are
yeah, it
actually
is.
putting in effort.
Yeah, that is really disrespectful to an
Yeah.
artist or a creative person, because you're not respecting his work. So yeah, but anyways,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
So,
there.
can you take us through the process of how you like if you have a new project? So, what is like the thinking and the flow that goes on in your mind? Like, how do you start?
Okay, so there is always a design brief given by the XYZ or whatever. So what the very first step is, which I always tell my students, is to have a small notebook, a
Okay.
sketchbook sort of, without any rules. Because you don't know where your mindset will work. You never know where you might just get your design inspiration from. So it is good to carry a small notebook or a sketchbook and constantly sketch, or XYZ, whatever. So, for example, I was in Pushkar and I saw this beautiful painting, and I clicked a picture and I kept it. And then I went to Chandni Chowk. I saw certain things. I saw certain people. I saw certain textiles. I took a sample and I stacked it. So if I have a project, I can always go back to my this small notebook and see if something matches. And then I might work around. And the second thing is I always look around the surroundings. I mean, like since I travel a lot within my Delhi city, I see people, I observe people. Delhi Metro is a very good inspiration. You'll see all sorts of people, all sorts of wearing different colors, a
Hmm.
different character of their own. And I jot them down, I sketch them down. What if I have a collection to do? What if I have to make a
Hmm.
poster? So I can always go back, I always refer.
Yeah.
I'll show you, I have a learning diary from my college days. It's still, I mean, I'll just give me a sec.
Oh, sure,
Which,
sure.
so I mean, it's this big if you
Oh my
guys can
God.
see. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I mean,
it's huge.
I can show you. So I mean, is the audience, can they see?
Yeah, yeah, they can. So is it a fabric?
Yes, so yeah, I mean, sorry, things are dropping. Can they see? Is
Yeah.
it clear? So like every page would have certain, I mean, things are just dropping off. Uh, I'll
So
also
this
show you.
is like a bundle of all the inspirations that you had.
Yeah, inspiration, some redos, and if you guys
Wow.
can see. Uh, so how things were created.
Right. Looks amazing, yeah. Looks amazing.
So I've always, cataloged all these things, and which has actually helped me. So during my graduation projects that I was doing, uh, the brief that was given to me by my designer was travel. The word he had given was simple travel.
Okay.
And how I was supposed to come up with a collection based on that single word was, again, brainstorming and everything, and collections was done and everything. When it came to presentation, we have something called an external and internal jury. So the thing was to, come across a collection with that same word. So you can make the collection, but there's something called presentation also. You can
Okay.
bake a cake, but if the cake does not have a cherry, it's not appeasing at all,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So what I did was those were days, I mean, to get marks, obviously we were working for marks. So I had the collection, I had all the swatches and the design things that I've done. I also had a diary like this, which I gave it back to the designer because I was supposed to. And I also had something called a small notebook that I made for, because those were days we didn't have Uber and Ola, and metro was still coming up in Delhi. So I used to travel by bus.
Okay.
So what I did was, since it was a travel inspired, and going to the office by bus was also traveling. So what I did was, as a presentation form, my first day to my last day, all the bus tickets were all compiled and stuck to
Wow.
that notebook and showed. I was present in the jury because since it was travel inspired, this was my personal experience. So how we had grown, how we had done the collection, though it might not be a part of it, but it was something, the word travel was there that can be included.
I
So
think
you
that's
have to,
very creative.
yeah, so you have to be, there are no rules in creativity.
Right.
It's all in you. How you present, how you go about it is your personal choice. And nobody's there, nobody's going to correct you कि भाई ये सही है, ये गलत है. It is a person's individuality that is important, and there is no boundary. Sky is the limit.
Right. So I have a question related to this only, but before that, our chat option will be open now for the audience. So you can just drop in your questions for Richard there.
Yes, yes.
Uh, yeah. So moving on to you, what question that like I have one like really important question, I guess that I think design and creativity. Do you think it is related to a specific field only? Like how can you incorporate design in creativity in all the spheres of your life, and especially in work?
I think there is there's no restriction because creativity is everywhere, like I said before, and it depends on the person how he exercises it, right?
Hmm.
Creativity does not mean you have to be good and artistic, right? Creativity can be how you put your files. Creativity can be how you organize your desktop. Creativity can be, I think there's somebody asking a questions. Oh, oh my God,
Oh,
I've just been
no, no,
bombarded
no.
with questions. Can we go one by one the
Yeah,
questions?
obviously we will go one by one, but first maybe you want to complete
Yeah,
your
yeah,
answer and then we'll
yeah,
go
yeah.
one by one.
So I think a creativity of an accountant might be different
Hmm.
than a creativity of a chef. He might show his creativity on the plate, while the accountant might show his creativity on the balance sheet. So there is no restriction in terms of creativity. I think everybody is creative. It's how you exercise depends on you.
Right. I think being, I think creativity can be like in how you dress up, how you do everything, like how you make your Excels, your PPTs. You can
Yes,
like incorporate
exactly.
it everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
So I think I'll just go to the questions one by one. So
Yes, please.
Chetna Bish want to ask, what are some of the artists or people whose work inspired you?
Okay, the very first inspiration would be my teacher who taught me illustration. Her name is Minakshi. I call her Minakshi, ma'am. Minakshi Singh is her full name, and she resides in Dwarka. And she's a wonderful teacher. I mean, she's taught us illustration like, I mean, I owe my credits to her. And I mean, I just spoke to her before we had this meeting. So,
Oh,
I mean, she's a brilliant person. Otherwise, apart from that, there is this visual artist called Srishti Roy Gupta. So, I think she's the ambassador for Adobe right now. I think she's in
okay.
London right now. She is my senior from my college. How she used to work and how she's progressed is someone whom I look. Uh, Third is, I look around. There is no specific, in case you see my work on my Instagram, uh, it's generally people that I see around, what I observe. It can be Nirma soap ka packaging that I like. So, because a lot of my work is very colorful. Uh, it's generally, what, I just go around observing, I put my headphones on if I'm taking a metro and, I see, there are these beautiful artworks, in Delhi metro station in case many people who are from anyone who's from Delhi can have a look. And you exit out also they have, sponsored artworks. So these are inspiration. And people, day-to-day people, it's not always fashion influencers. Uh, it can be a normal person wearing a sari or your mohalle ka dhobi wala. I mean, he can be an inspiration, might be wearing a cool new printed shirt and might look good. So that's how I go about.
Right. So next question, like Nishant wants to ask, what software and tools do you use to create your illustrations and designs?
Okay, so I have there are two parts to this. There's part A and part B. Part A is primarily sketching, pencil and other things, different mediums, watercolors, Staedtler colors, gouache, inks, and XYZ. And part B for softwares, there's something called Procreate for digital illustration. It's a iOS based application on your iPads. I also use Illustrator in case I want to do some vector work. Photoshop is basically for photo editing, and there's something called InDesign. Also, they all are Adobe based softwares. There's InDesign for layouts. So these are some of the softwares I work with. Canva is also in, but I do not recommend Canva because Canva has ready-made templates. So in case you have a certain work, you have to fit your work into that template. You don't have the freedom to work as per your size or whatever. So these are some of the softwares and tools that I work with.
So Sankalp wants to ask, how do you handle feedback or criticism from clients? Like, and what tips do you have for other designers to do the same?
Okay, it is important to accept criticism because that's how you grow. But make sure you know the criticism is healthy, right? If somebody comes up to you and says, "आपका illustration बेकार है," when he can't even draw, that's unhealthy. But you don't have to react to it. Just say, "Okay, ठीक है," because it's not necessary for the masses to agree to your work, right? If MF Hussain puts up a painting and half of India says, okay, you can't go around painting naked women, but there are people who really appreciate his art, whereas his artwork gets sold in Christie's. What does that? I mean, like, which one do you scale more? The artwork that got sold in Christie's, right? So, I mean, criticism is there. I mean, every artist, illustrator gets criticized, right? Which is completely fine. And there are certain criticism which are healthy. I mean, people might say, okay, certain colors have to be added because this is the season. Okay, ठीक है, add it. But always make sure to differentiate between healthy criticism and unhealthy criticism because there will be people who will go around criticizing you even if they don't even know how to sketch. And and you might have invested years to perfecting yourself. People can bring it down overnight, which is dunyadari. I mean, dunya has to nibaw that dunyadari. There will be people like that.
Like, I think it can be frustrating, but it's a hard pill and you have to swallow it. You
Yeah,
just
it's a
have
hard
to.
pill. You have to swallow it. I mean, at the end of the day, they are not adding anything to your work. Neither they are taking it. They will just say it.
Yeah.
That's all they can do.
Okay, so Ator wants to ask, I want to learn to design, but I don't know where to start. I have been practicing drawing, so how should I begin with designing and working digitally?
Okay, so I think this person has to be sure what when you say design, it's like a huge thing, right? It's like, I mean, do you want to get into fashion? Do you want to get into interiors? Do you want to get into furniture? I mean, there's something called aeronautical design. There's something called weapon designing. I mean, there's something called balloon designing. I mean, sound designing also. So which one do you want to get into? That is the first thing. Secondly, coming to drawing practices, it is generally advised to. There's this first exercise that I always tell my students: take a sheet, take a pencil, and just randomly scribble. We go horizontal, go vertical, go circular because this will give you your muscle memory to your hand. And then onwards, you move on to specific sketching, like basic shapes, eventually turning those basic shapes into 3D. If a square becomes a 3D, a circle becomes a sphere, a triangle becomes a conical. That's how you go about it. And YouTube is filled with basic videos of how to do sketching. Otherwise, in case you are fearing about I mean, if I want to get into an institution like NIT and NIFT and sketching is important, yes, sketching is important, but you can always excel on your skill without getting into any coaching institutes. YouTube is filled with sketching videos.
Right.
Not just that, in case you are approaching NIT, NIFT, Pearl, or any design institute, there are sample papers, there are ready sample papers. You do it, you complete that, and you are good to go. And always read about design and art. I didn't do any coaching. I just went for it. I didn't have the money to do it. I did it. So, I mean, of course, there'll be time when you'll be thinking, यार sketching नहीं हो रही है, नहीं हो रही है. Leave it. Go for a walk. Listen to music. Come back again. Start. But don't give up.
So, like, I've heard this one thing that if you have a block somewhere in your work and you just go for a walk, your brain like kind of it restarts, it reboots.
Of course, it's
So
like
I guess
human
that
brain is,
helps.
yeah, human brain is just like a computer. It just comes to a standstill.
Yeah.
You might have blackouts. As designers, we have blackouts. कि भाई इसके आगे क्या करें? We go for a walk, have a chocolate, listen to music, go out for a walk. It
Yeah.
will help you out. You need to clear that blockage. It is very,
So
very important.
I think Athor, you have to have a healthy relationship with having mental blocks. We don't have to like be hard on ourselves for that. So moving on, Anushka wants to ask, what's your take on the AI in the design field? Oh,
I
that's an
think,
interesting question.
yes, I was prepared for this. I think AI is taking over, and I think, and it is very important. But for a person who is completely into 100% hand-on illustration, it is very difficult, because he might have a certain type of market or certain consumers who would only want hand done, which becomes a challenging. For me, I mean, I'm a 50-50 because I do digital as well as hands-on. And I am not so keen on going on to AI right now because I think I really need to groom myself for AI before I get into it. Because, I mean, you can't just jump or change mediums, right? But it's a good thing as well as, I mean, I wouldn't say bad, but it's like a drawback, for people like, there are people who just, example, a person who's into calligraphy. His main USP is his hand, right? How he moves his hand and gets his fonts done. And for him, like AI would be like taking his job, right?
Right.
Uh, but it's a give and take sort of thing, it's there. Uh, but there are people who would stick to the old school, old methods of, hand done, hand sketched, handmade things. So it's a 50-50 on my AI. Though I
So,
really want to get into AI.
so do you think like if we keep on using these tools that make our work so easy, it will affect our creativity? Like it will kind of make us lazy?
Are tools like AI?
Yeah.
No, it's not going to make you lazy because in AI you also have to put in your intellectual property. You have to decide your colors. You have to design the
Hmm.
font. You have to design perspective, everything. It's again, like it's easier compared to what was done previously. But
Okay.
yeah, for person who's like I said, like person who's completely into hand drawn or who's really old school, who has no links to softwares and technology, he might find it really difficult. So it might just demotivate him.
So, I think that brings us to the last question for this session.
Yeah.
Like, you are someone who has started designing when I think it was not that popular. People didn't knew that this can be a good field, and now
Yeah,
you are here where we have like tons of designs. People are into fashion, leather, embroidery, everything. India is a
exactly.
representing country for fashion now, I guess. So,
Yeah.
what changes have you seen over this span in the design thinking and creativity?
Of course, there has been a shift because earlier it was design, then came e-commerce, so everything went digital, and then now we have AI coming in. So there has been changes. But people who stick to the roots will stick to the roots. You cannot change certain things. For example, quite recently, there's this school called Chanakya School of Design, if you know. Uh, they associated themselves with Christian Dior and they had a show at Gateway of India in Mumbai. So everything that was done, how the presentations of garments, everything was hand done, right? So, there is that market there. And of course, progress is good, but you cannot forget your past, right? Where you've come from. Yes, it's difficult for people who are very old school or who are completely um, depths of hand, but it is always good to progress. And as we go along, the changes that I've seen is that, like it's become easy. People want quick work.
Hmm.
And there are so many options. A nahi to B nahi to C, which again, affects somehow. But it is always important to stick to your guts, stick to your roots, and respect your work. Do not compromise anywhere. Because this industry of design is very dynamic. It keeps changing. COVID happened. The design industry was, it was affected badly, but now we are growing. We are growing and we are doing well. And of course, there is a scarcity of in the fashion and the clothing industry, and people don't want to pay. But that's the reality of it. But you have to make your own mark. And people who really want to get into design and illustration, I would suggest if you're working, yes, keep working, and side by side also do some freelance work and do your own work as well because it's very important because At the end of the day, you need money, and with inflation's going up, and you got bills to pay, it will help you balance out. And it is
Right.
always good to teach and to help others grow, the coming generations.
Right. So
Yeah.
I guess that brings us to the end of this session. It was lovely talking to you, Richard. Everyone, you can follow Richard on Instagram and just reach out to him anytime.
Yeah, I'm free to, yeah. You can always drop in a text in case admission process, exam, creativity, color mediums. I'll be happy to respond you guys back.
Okay, so thank you, Richard, for joining in, and bye bye. This is the end of our session.
Thank you. It was lovely being here. Bye bye.